Anyway, like, let me share it again for just a second. Like when we look at, I know there's am I showing you the one that's based off of WebKids? Are you seeing the old Chromium? Okay, I can't tell, my share button's weird. Anyway, when you look at this, like not all of these things are addressed on the case studies. Like, and we're not going to talk about accommodations and modifications till later. So part of this you would leave blank. But motor, there's nothing in there on the case studies much to talk about motor. So there wouldn't be anything to fill in there. Social, emotional, there is on all of them. But so you're going to have blank spots on it. And I would anticipate that you do. And I don't want you to make up information to put there. I just want you to leave it blank. All right. And when I type on here, I think how I want to do that. Okay, it'll type right in those lines, so it should be okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. So if your template gets fouled up because it's just a Word document, it's okay. Keep your information and keep going. I'm not going to grade it on prettiness, if that's such a, okay? So you get to choose which one you want to use. I don't care. Choose the one that's, I would say, the most similar to what you use on a daily basis is what would make sense. Elena, do you have a, can you do a blank one from New Hampshire? Is that where you were? I can't remember what.
Yeah, I could make a blank one.
Can you do a blank one so that it's something that you're familiar with to use?
Yeah.
Okay, so but you're not, it's not going to be a real one. No, not real students, okay?
Yeah, I could download a PDF and convert it to Word and delete all the information from students and use it from Word.
Yep, that will work. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Well, makes me feel that way you're doing something that's what you're going to be using. Anybody else need an accommodation for that? Who all uses WebKids? Casey, what do you use? Or Cassie? Casey. You have to turn on your microphone first.
Sorry, I use WebKids. I was looking.
Okay, that's fine. So everybody, so you can choose between the new one and the old one. I don't care. If you're using WebKids, that one that I just showed you is probably going to be the one that is most similar to what you're using. As I said, all of the information is not going to be there by far. So you're going to have to go to, let me pull it up, and then I'll share. You're going to go to assignments in your class, because I know some of you said that you weren't real experienced with Blackboard. And then you're going to go to IEP assignment. And when you scroll down, this is the old IEP form. This IEP with helpful hints is the red one that I was just showing you. It's based on the old form. Anyway, there's the grading rubric is there, and then there's 4 kids to pick from. Bethany is a 4th grader with mild intellectual disability. Braden is I think he's a freshman that's gifted. So if you're gifted, you've got the option of doing an IEP for gifted. Jason is a 9th grader with a learning disability and ADHD. Kayla, I think, is a 4th grader with, I can't remember, I haven't read hers for a while, because we don't have that many people go through the program who are working on the gifted licensure. Anyway, that's where you're going to download it, and that's where I will add that IEP that I was showing you that's based on WebKids. So what your assignment is for the next 2 weeks as far as the IEP goes is you are going to do the background information. You know, who's at the meeting, And I only want the people listed at the meeting that have to be there by law. I don't want any extras. Like by law, it's the parent or a guardian, local education agency administrator, whoever is appointed to be that person. It could be the school counselor, but it's usually the principal. Special education teacher, a general education teacher. Those are the 4 that have to be there by law. Nobody else has to be there. So I don't want any extra names on there except those 4. And you can make up as many names as, I don't care what you call the people, other than you need to call the student what it is off the case study so that I know which kiddo you're doing. But, I've had Minnie Mouse attending staffings. I've had Daisy Buchanan from The Great Gatsby. People have been really creative, and I really get a chuckle out of it. It makes the grading a little bit more fun. Anyway, you can be as creative on those names as you want, but make sure you have. And the students, because they're not 18, do they have to be there or not?
No.
They do not have to be there, but their name has to be on the IEP as far as the top. If they're high school kids and they're over 16, they need to be invited. So, how many of you teach high school? So, Tony and Casey, you know that you have to do transition plans. Anybody, and for anybody that's got 14-year-olds and up, you have to do transition plans. Those kids need to be invited.
But if I have kids that are invited and don't attend all the time.
Yeah, but you still have to invite them.
Yeah, just write invited, did not attend. So
Yep, legally that covers your bases. Yep, yeah. And when they get to be 18 and they have to sign for themselves, they have to show up, or you can't have the meeting legally.
But if the guardian shows up, though, even though
if they have legal guardianship through the courts, the guardian can sign.
Gotcha.
But if they haven't obtained legal guardianship through the courts, the kids have to sign for themselves.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's kind of touchy because sometimes I really think they ought to get legal guardianship because I know the student's capabilities, especially if you're talking about a low incidence, someone who has significant disabilities. But sometimes parents don't get around to it.
I just had a student that was able to drop out of school because he was not having to have his mom be part of the decision, and I'm sure she still doesn't even know. So he would not allow us. He wouldn't allow us to contact her. So
that's his right.
Yeah.
And it stinks as far as, obviously none of us would agree with that because we're educators. If we think the more education, the better, but you can't control it. And, and I think about it from the student's viewpoint sometimes. They probably have been struggling with school every day of their life since they entered school in kindergarten. It has not been a fun, happy place for them to be. Maybe they had some friends and maybe they didn't. But you think about it, it's like, I don't blame them for failing. The only trouble is they're setting themselves up for a rougher life from now on without that high school diploma. But I understand it, but I don't like it. So if my goal always was, if I can be the one person that would make a difference and maybe they would stay long enough to get a diploma, all for it. But then on the other hand, I had one kid that dropped out 6 times on me. He got in trouble with the law and he had to keep coming back. And at that point, Kansas was monitoring your success rate, and he counted as a dropout against my success rate 6 times. And the superintendent finally said, I don't care how many times he comes back to school. We will not care about that percentage number, because it was a big deal at that point in time. That was part of it. Instead of QPA, the quality assurance programs that they have now for, the success rate, all that for students. This was before that. And they counted your graduation rate, your dropout rate. And so my numbers were hurting the district. He said, I don't care. We're doing what's best for kids. If we can get him here for 3 days in a year, we'll take him. So that did help me. But boy, I was like, every time he'd come back to school and drop out, I think, oh, here we go again. Okay, so anyway, The parts that you're going to fill out on the IEP are listed on Blackboard. You're going to fill out the student information as far as date of birth, make up a date of birth that's reasonable for the age of the student that you're working with. Make up a date that you're pretending to do the IEP, and make up a date that you're going to implement the IEP. And the date that you have the IEP meeting and implement it may not be the same date. Does anybody know the situation where you have two different dates? You got Jessica.
I've had a few. One, we wrote the IEP in the elementary school at the end of the year, but didn't initiate any of the new services until they started 5th grade at the middle school.
Mhm.
And then I've also had, like going into winter break, like the 2 weeks before or whatever, we had a kiddo that was going to start receiving like math in the resource room.
Mhm.
But that last 2 weeks is not 2 weeks, but last few days is typically fun activities and things. And so we went ahead and just postponed it until we came back from break.
Yeah, so, and those are two really good examples. Another one that I can think of is sometimes we add services to an IEP, like at the high school level, you might add work study services to an IEP, and you're not going to implement that part of it until maybe school starts next fall, but you're writing the IEP this spring. Stacy, did you have something to say? Nope. Okay, well, your microphone clicked on for a minute, and I don't want to.
Oh,
Okay. I don't want, and it doesn't, if you have something to say, speak up. Everybody learns more rather than just from listening to me. You guys have all got some experience and good ideas. So anyway, you're going to make up the date that the IEP is implemented and when you have it. And if it's implemented on a different day, I want it explained in the IEP somewhere, you know, whatever section it fits in. And you're going to not make up present levels of academic performance. You're going to write those in, and those are in the case study. The present levels of academic performance, you're going to talk about reading, math, written expression or written language, whichever way you want to call it. State assessment, not scores, but state assessment information is in the case studies. You can make up and add MAPS scores for the students if you want to. You can add curriculum-based measurement scores that would be appropriate.
we use AimsWeb. Could I use AimsWeb instead of MAPS?
Yep, you sure can. I do not want any IQ scores like WISC or WASTE scores added, because this is not a re-eval or an initial placement. This is just an annual IEP that you're writing. So I don't want any of those scores added in. So that section, like in the general intelligence section, you're going to have one sentence, and it's going to say something to the effect of, if you do Jason, it would say, Jason is a student who has been identified as having an a learning disability. That's all you need. Or if it's Bethany, Bethany has been identified as a student who has a mild intellectual disability. So it's really short, because we don't have all that other information in your case study, and I don't want you to make it up for that. We are not going to write goals at this point, and we're not going to do accommodations yet. So you're going to do the hearing, the vision, and when you do hearing and vision, make sure you put a date on there. None of the kids in the case studies have hearing or vision problems. Vision is checked every other year. Hearing is checked every 3 years. So I think on the new IEP, on the one that's based off of WebKids, it asks you for the follow-up date. So the next follow-up date would be 3 years on hearing from the day that you make up for the first one.
So we're just we're making up that date, that initial date of the testing?
Yeah, you sure
Okay.
are. Okay. And make sure that the date that you pick is within 2 years of when you're doing the IEP for vision, and within 3 years of the IEP for the hearing. For health, They don't have, nobody has significant health problems that would affect their learning, other than if you're using a medical model a little bit, ADHD might go under the health problems if the case study says the student has ADHD. I think that's all you need to be able to do the IEPs for this time. If you get started on it and you're not sure, email me and I'll try to get right back to you. If somebody asked a question, you put this is not an area of concern for the student at this time, yes. That works fine. Like on the things that are not addressed in the IEP, that works fine. Like if we're talking about motor skills, because nothing is mentioned for any of the kids about motor skills, you can say, you know, motor skills are age appropriate. This is not a concern. For a high school student or even a middle school student, they probably have, or PE, they probably have PE. So you could say, you know, interacts with their peers at recess, motor skills or commensurate with peers or something like that. Okay, so you can make up something for that. So do you have any questions right now about the IEP part? Okay, somebody said that they have never seen an IEP like either one of these. If you haven't, can you download something that's similar that you use? Can you do a blank one? Whoever wrote that. If you can do a blank one, you can download the form that you're comfortable using, that you use on your job. Just remember that your license that you have covers pre-K, that you're going to receive covers pre-K through 12, and that you may not always teach where you're teaching right now. Right, Elena? She not only moved jobs, she moved countries to teach someplace else. But I mean, think about that. So the broader your horizons, the better off you'll be. I will go through and I will post an IEP, like, let me pull it back up. Let me share this one more time so you can see what I'm talking about. Like I went through the IEP form and I wrote in red all kinds of stuff just to help you, kind of as a guide to help fill in different parts. You know, not necessarily just for this class, but for the future also. You know, in our cooperative, 3 times a year they pull in teachers and ask us to go through and we evaluate everybody else's IEP. And that's the best learning thing I think I've ever done as far as writing IEPs, because sometimes you have a kiddo and you want an IEP to be positive, because you're going to share with parents, and parents are giving you their best and their brightest child they have, and they don't want to read all negative stuff. They want to read stuff that their child is good at, and everybody has good things about them. So like in the current performance section, if you can talk about some of the positives first before you talk about the negatives. I was taught a long time ago, anytime you deal with parents, it's kind of like an onion sandwich. You start with the bread, which is kind of sweet, and there's something good that they're good at, and then you put in the onion, which is kind of bitter, which is where they need to work, and then you end with another piece of bread, which is kind of sweet. So you're being realistic with the parents, but you're not just hammering on the kid. Because if everything is negative, pretty soon the parents think that you don't value their child at all. And we know you do, or you wouldn't be in the job you're in. So sometimes you have to work a little bit hard to let parents know how much you value their child. Go ahead, Margot.
I was curious, I know for some parts we are not allowed to make up information on the IEP, but in other parts we can make up information. Can we, as far as like student strengths go, can we get a little creative with that as well? Or do you want us to strictly stick to what is in the case study?
Well, you blipped out a little bit. I didn't hear everything you said, and my clock's going to strike just a second.
Okay, are you ready?
Now my clock's done. Okay, say it again, okay?
Okay. Okay. I know in certain parts you said do not make up information, only use what's in the case study. But in other parts, we can add information.
Mhm.
My question is, when it comes to student strengths,
Yes,
can we get creative with that piece of information?
yes, you may.
Okay,
I don't want you to add test scores as far as IQ scores.
right.
But
But
you
I
know,
could maybe
the other
add
stuff,
that, like, the student is very active in sports or something like, just
yes,
things like that. Okay.
yes, you can add that kind of stuff because those are positive. And some of that stuff is in the case studies, not a whole lot, but some is. So yeah, you can add that kind of stuff, or you can add that they have a wide circle of friends, or that they, like a high school student, typically has a different language register that they use with their buddies, and it's a lot more slangy and maybe foul than what they're used when they're talking to teachers. And you overhear that, that, and it's okay to say, to add that in there, that, has different language registers that they use with their friends as opposed to this thing with adults, You can add those kinds of things. Yeah, those kinds of things are fine. I just don't want a bunch of IQ tests and stuff added in, was really what I don't want added in. And if there's a section on the IEP that is not addressed by the case study, you don't have to add anything there. You can just say, in this case, you'll be able to say nothing in the case study addressed it. Or you can say it's not a concern. I don't care how you take care of that part of it. Because the case study was written for the old IEPs, not the new ones. So between now and summer, when I do this again, I'm going to have to come up with new case studies. But it was written for the old ones. And I don't have time to get good ones written up for the new ones yet, so that you guys have time to use them and be fair to you. So that's just not right. Okay? So we okay on IEPs? Do you have any other questions? If you get started and you get hung up, let me know. Email me, and I'll help you through it. All right? I have a sample case study, IEP, and instructional plan that I did last semester that I'll send out when it gets closer to time to do the instructional plan. For the IEP part, I don't think you'll need it for what we're doing in the next 2 weeks, but I'll send it out after that so you can look at it. Let me pull up my notes and see where we are. Okay, so we're going to talk about MTSS. And MTSS is the same thing as response to intervention. It's just the Kansas terminology for it. So originally when they started doing placements for high incidence kids, especially for kids with learning disabilities, Kansas had what they called, it was a model, I've lost the word. It was based on standardized testing. And it was the difference between what they thought the student's IQ was and where they were performing. And so it was all based on the difference between those two scores. And it was horrible because you would go through all this stuff and you knew a student needed help, but maybe 1 point was what kept them out of the program. And so when Kansas switched to MTSS, or when RTI came along, they started looking at problem solving and what kids needed instead of standardized testing, which is, to me, so much better for kids because we can get in and we can help them early. So when you're doing MTSS, first the schools have to identify a subgroup of kids, and they consider those their at-risk kids. And they monitor their at-risk kids. And then they do interventions for them. And early interventions usually focused on reading, most of the kids. When you're talking about learning disabilities, 80% of the kids with learning disabilities have trouble in reading as opposed to math. And it's also 80% boys compared to girls. And it tends to run in families, although it is not genetic. I don't know. I mean, it's just, and nobody really knows. I mean, you'd have to do an autopsy to find out what caused the learning disability or how it showed up, and that's not real effective treatment, I don't think. But anyway, It's like something in the brain's not wired right, or it's not, I don't want to say it's not wired right. It's wired differently than yours or mine. And so the way they learn is different than the way typical kids learn. So you have to find a teaching style, a teaching strategy that matches their learning style. And sometimes you just think you've got it figured out, and it's like, nope, that wasn't it either. I'll have to try a different one. So anyway, it's a problem-solving strategy is what MTSS is. So MTSS has two purposes. It's going to provide struggling students with early intervention that's effective, and it's going to provide a way that you can assess learning and learning needs. Now in Kansas, gifted is a state mandate. I'm going to talk about gifted for a minute because we're supposed to. Gifted is not included in IDEA, nor was it included in 94-142, the first special ed, big federal law. It wasn't included in either one of those because it's not a handicapping condition. The Kansas parents of gifted kids have enough clout, and they have been able to keep gifted education in the schools. And if I had a child who was gifted, I would want them to have the advantages so that they were always challenged and able to keep going forward. So I understand that. Most of the schools don't identify students as gifted until second or third grade, unless they're like above genius level, and then it's so obvious when they're little that then they can identify them. But gifted focuses on student strengths, and so when you're talking gifted, if a typical kid is functioning at seventh, or if they're a seventh grader and the typical kid is functioning seventh grade, there's a gap between where the gifted kid is and where the seventh grader is, and you want that gap to increase. You want that gifted kid to keep being challenged so that they're going above and above and above because they have the abilities to do that. Where we're talking about high incidence, like learning disabilities or mild intellectual disability, here's the normal kid, and here's the, oops, I'm off camera, and here's the kid with the disability. We want to pull them up to their peers. For gifted, we want to accelerate them further than their peers. So it's a difference in strategies and ideas when you're approaching it. In gifted education, most of the progress monitoring that's done is going to reflect students' strengths and mastery of those strengths. And you're going to use off-grade level measures. Sometimes they do curriculum compacting. Sometimes they allow kids to skip grades. They allow them to take a course, something that they're really good at. Like if they're really good in science, they might let a middle schooler take a high school biology class so that they're keeping them challenged. Now they'll let them take college classes. And it used to be that if you didn't have a IQ or a gifted IEP, they wouldn't let high school take college classes, but now they will let anybody if they can score in. And we've had several kids, and I bet you have in your districts too, had almost completed their college education by the time they get out of high school because they've done it all online. It's pretty impressive. I can't relate to them a whole lot. And I know you don't have to be gifted to teach gifted, but I always think maybe I should. Okay, so that's pretty much what MTSS is. And I know several people on their snowballs had commented that they were really concerned. Go ahead, Margot. Go ahead.
I was just curious if MTSS is a state law, like that a school has to have it.
Yes. How they implement it is up to the school, but they have to have an MTSS system that they report that they're doing.
And are there like specific parameters for what that MTSS needs to look like as far as the number of people involved in it, or?
No,
Okay.
they don't. And if your school is trying to say this without sticking my nose into somebody else's business, if you have, well, you know, there's what's proper, and then there's what people do sometimes, okay? if you have like Title I services, like a remedial reading program or remedial math program, that can count as your MTSS program. Because those kids are tested to get in there. And so they can use that as their MTSS without doing anything extra. And they monitor those kids and they report on them every year, their progress. So then maybe not everybody else is involved. In some school districts, MTSS is administrator, a school counselor, a special ed teacher, and a general ed teacher, and they have a meeting, and they meet because kids should go through the MTSS system before they get into special education. So they go through the process, and the process is like they start and they try that group of people meets and they talk about the strengths, kind of like you do for the IEP, the strengths, the weaknesses of the student, their functioning levels, how they learn, and they make a plan that they're going to use for 30 days to try these accommodations and these strategies. They meet back in 30 days, and if the strategies are successful, they stop there as far as special ed placement, but they continue those strategies in the classroom because they were being successful. If those strategies don't work, a lot of times that's the point where the kiddo is referred for special education. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, and that's the model I'm most familiar with. It's just I'm at a different school and that model's not quite followed. So I was just curious.
You know, and there are not very many secondary schools where I see a very good MTSS system in place. They might have an at-risk program for students who are struggling, or they might create a study hall situation for kids who are studying, but it's not, I don't see the meat of it as far as being based on instructional strategies. But they're meeting the letter of the law because they're providing an additional service.
Okay, that was my question. Thanks.
Yeah, it's not good enough, but it's good enough to get by legally, if that makes sense. Okay.
Yes.
So how many of you have really high functioning, or well, your MTSS, your systems function really well in your schools? 2 or 3? Oh man. So you know what happens if MTSS doesn't function very well? More kids get referred for IEPs.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there's an upside to that. Think about it this way, okay? Yeah, you're gonna have to do more paperwork because you're getting more kids, I get that. But the other side of it is, if you're the mama of that kid who barely qualifies, who would have just done okay with just getting some extra help in the classroom and a few extra strategies, think about how much more you can offer them. I mean, think about it. It's like individual education for that kid. And you're the experts. You've got all these strategies that you're learning to do with kids. They're going to, because they don't truly have a disability maybe, or they have a very minor disability level, you're going to be able to help them along so that it's going to impact them forever, where otherwise they wouldn't. So it's not bad. It's not a bad thing. The only label that I really hate to see kids get tied with is a ED or BD label, because that can keep you from doing a whole lot of things later in life if you have that label. You can't get into the military, for one thing, if you have that label. So, I mean, there's some jobs, high stress jobs, police, anything where you're carrying a gun, those jobs are affected if you have that label. So that one I will push off as long as I can. Jessica, yes?
I mean, at a certain point, though, it becomes a safety issue that we're no longer able to not put that label on. Because
sure.
If they leave our district and go somewhere else and we don't have that documented,
yeah, you're in trouble.
Yeah. I mean, so for me, it's,
well,
is it the greatest label in the world? Absolutely not. But some of our kids are emotionally disturbed. Some of our kids have severe behavior issues, and my youngest brother is one of them.
Well, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't ever use that label. I'm saying don't use it lightly. There are kids that need
absolutely, it. Yeah. I completely agree with that. It's definitely a necessity at times.
Yeah. Oh, and I had kids that were dangers. Yes. And I worked in the state hospital. I know, and I had kids in the public school, I had a knife pulled on me, and I been through a lot of stuff, but I don't, but that label to me is a last resort, and only do it for the kids that truly, truly need it. Sometimes when they used to do the old, and I know things have changed because I'm so old and I've been around so long, but it used to be when they were doing the regression formula to place kids, that's the word I was looking for. They did a regression formula when they had an IQ score and they had a functioning score, and if a kid didn't meet that, then if they didn't meet that regression, they'd slap them with a BD label, and then that way they could get services. Well, that label stuck with them forever, you know, and they really weren't behavior disorders. They just didn't, you know, they were kids that fell through the cracks. They didn't meet the regression formula, but they needed help. And so MTSS is so much better because you don't have to meet any regression formula in order to get into the services. It's how you're functioning and what services you need, how you're going to learn best. So MTSS is so much better. But you're right, that label is necessary for certain kids, and it doesn't change the safety issue when you have a BD label, because the safety issue is still there. But it shows that you've done due diligence in that you're trying to meet the needs of the student. Yeah. Okay, so you know where to go to get the IEP, you know where to go, and I will upload the other one probably tomorrow morning. I probably won't get it done tonight. So, and you know when you're typing on something that's a Word document, it's already sort of formatted, but not completely, like the one I just showed you, because it's not completely formatted. If you end up making a mess of it and you can't figure out what you're doing, just don't save it. Start over. Okay? Just keep your notes on something so you can copy and paste it in there. When we get ready to do goals, we're going to do SMART goals. Are you familiar with SMART goals? Okay, I see nods. So when you're going to be thinking about SMART goals, and when you pick the student off the blackboard, it tells you like what age level they are, whether they're elementary or secondary. Pick the one for the job that you're doing now. But when we write goals, just to be thinking as you read your case studies, you're going to write goals for 3 different levels. You're going to write an elementary or pre-K goal, an elementary or middle school goal, and a high school goal, because your license covers pre-K 12. I want you to be experienced in writing goals in all 3 levels. So like if you have and I'm going to go through this again next time, but I just wanted to kind of prep you for a little bit. So if you're doing a high school kiddo that has trouble in reading, for a pre-K goal, I might be thinking about being able to say the names of letters when shown the cards with a certain percent accuracy by a certain date, you know, because letter recognition is what they're working on in preschool. For elementary middle school goal, I might talk about sight words. And then for high school, you're going to think about comprehension for reading, because you don't really teach sight words anymore in high school. In high school, it's all based off of context reading. So for math, if you're thinking preschool math goal, counting, rote counting, but you have to be, for a SMART goal, I have to be able to read your goal and work with that student and know exactly what you're measuring. So if you say that they identify, well, how do they identify? Identify is not a measurable word. So they're going to say it, they're going to read it out loud, they're going to, something like that. So for math, they might be able to orally count to 100 for preschool. I don't know, that's kind of high. For middle school, it might be they're working on multiplication facts or addition and subtraction facts. And addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, which is the hardest to learn? Turn on your mic. Turn on your mic.
I would guess.
Division, I think.
I would guess
Division is
subtraction.
No, division is the hardest to learn, because in subtraction, you can say, well, I have 5 and I take away 3, and you can physically, you know, manipulate to take away. But when you're dividing, it's harder to make, you have to be able to make those groupings, and you have remainders and all that stuff. Division is far harder to learn than any of the other 3. You might remember that for the quiz. I think that might be on there. Okay. So division's really harder to learn. How many basic facts are there? When you're talking addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, you need to know that. Okay, as you're reading through the stuff, find that number while you're reading. I think that's one of the questions on there. Let me think about where we're at. Okay, so for where I'm goals. So for preschool, I might have a math goal that's like rote counting, counts out loud to a certain number. For middle school, I might be doing, well, for like third and fourth grade is typically where you start introducing multiplication facts, right? Anyways, because it's been a while since I taught third, but yes, okay. So you might be able to do write so many answers, or take a time test and get a certain number done within a time limit. For high school math, you're talking about solving equations with variables. Like you might have one variable or two variables. You might have a 3-step problem or a 5-step math problem. So those are the kinds of things you're going to be thinking about for your 3 different levels of goals. Because if tomorrow, and it could happen, because your contracts typically say, or other duties as assigned, that means that they can relocate you at the drop of a hat. That it has happened. So if you would happen to get moved to a different level, you at least have experience writing goals for those levels. Okay. So quiz 1, did I tell you about these last time? Did I go through the stuff with you, what's on them? Okay, so you're ready for quiz 1. Do you want me to go through them again? Okay, quiz 1 covers group sizes. I'm going to post this so you don't have to write it down, okay? Like, when you're doing explicit instruction, are you going to, small groups, whole class size, individualized? Peer tutoring, you need to know what it is. The kinds of instructional delivery software. What are prerequisite skills? Anybody? Just speak up. Prerequisite skills. If I'm talking about division, what would be a prerequisite skill for division?
Multiplication.
Yep, exactly.
It's anything you need to know prior to being able to do the current skill.
Exactly. Yeah, very good definition. Yes. Okay, so if I'm breaking tasks into parts, what's that called? Because you do this, and the coaches are the best people I have ever seen at doing this. And I am a huge college basketball fan. Like, this is the highlight of my life right now, is the NCAA tournament. But coaches, they take their plays, they take film from other schools, and they watch it and they break it down, and they can see the plays and see how the different plays are run. They are amazing at task analysis. Think about if they would teach special ed, what they could do for us. Because they can, so when you're working with reading and you want a student to learn a certain skill, you may have to break it down into task analysis. So you need to know what task analysis is. You need to know the purpose of CBMs. Are you all familiar with the term CBM? Okay. So curriculum-based measurements. What's the purpose of them? Anybody?
Is to assess where the student is compared to standards, or where he's supposed to be.
Yep, and it's a real quick way of monitoring progress. It's what they're typically used for. So when you're writing an IEP or you're writing an instructional plan, you might have to do progress monitoring like every 3 weeks. A CBM is a real quick and easy way to do that. And they have them for math and reading, and they're all over the internet, and they're just as efficient as any of the others that you can download or buy, and they're free on the internet. I think Ames Web has lots, right? Yeah. Explicit instruction. You know what that is? You know what direct instruction is? Where you're directly working with the student, that's explicit instruction, where you're working on this particular skill, all right? The steps that you have in teaching the lesson, like, you know, your lesson plan, you know, you have your get their, you know, their engagement task at the beginning where you get them to focus, and then you review yesterday's lesson, and then you introduce today's lesson, you know, those steps you go through in a lesson plan. Have you all been taught to do lesson plans? So, yeah, you need to know those steps. What is considered mastery level learning? What percentage?
I don't know percentage.
Is it 90 to 100? No.
80 is mastery, and that's why so many times on IEP goals, you'll see that they will achieve 80%, 80% by such and such a date. That's because 80% is considered mastery. There's a big except on here. If you are talking, okay, 80% is mastery, but if you're talking reading accuracy, you want it to be 90%. So there's two different things, and I know that's confusing, but you know, mastery is 80% of the skill. They can do it 80% of the time, and they get 80% right. They've mastered it. But if you're talking about reading accuracy, and on IEPs, it's a really good idea to include reading accuracy. And the easiest way to get that is if you open their science book or a social studies book for a class that's at their grade level, and have them read for a minute, just like you would on a CBM, and see how accurate they are in the reading, which is, it's simply divide the number of words that they read by the total number that they got, divide the number they got correct by the total number they read. That gives you their accuracy score. And if they're going to do independent reading, you want it to be at accuracy. Like to read the library book at home, they need to be able to read it at 90% accuracy to do anything independently. Okay, and there's a real, I mean, not that this pertains to this class so much, but just something that I learned. There's a really easy way to help kids pick library books that are appropriate for their level. You have them open the book to a middle page, just flop it open and have them read. And if there's more than 5 words on one page they don't know, it's too hard. Have them pick a different one. I mean, that's just a quick and dirty way to pick library books. You need to know about graphic organizers, you know, like Venn diagrams, you know, similarities and differences. I'm trying to think of all of them. There's hundreds of them. Concept maps, that's a graphic organizer. Word webs, all of those are graphic organizers, and how you would use them. Like, what would you use a word web for? If you're trying to come up with, somebody's going to write something and they're going to describe characteristics of them, you might use a word web so that they've got ideas out here floating around that they can pull together to write their story. Teaching students to generalize is really important. Like the skills that you teach them, like if a student has trouble with consonant, vowel, silent E words, and you're teaching that lesson in your resource room, or you're teaching it to them one-on-one, well, you want them to be able to take that skill that they've learned working with you and use it when they're doing social studies so they can sound out words there too. So you want them to generalize. You need to know about modeling, guided practice. You need to know about record keeping as far as progress monitoring, within I know it's crazy, but the types of graphs, because that's on the praxis. You need to know how to record behaviors and the purpose of self-correcting. Okay, so that's for quiz 1. And then the second quiz mostly is on IEPs and IDEA. You know, an IDEA is Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It first started in 1997, and then it was reauthorized in 2004. and they broadened it in 2004. You need to know what FAPE is, free appropriate public education. The whole continuum for services and placements, from full-time in general education to full-time in a restricted environment that's even off campus. You need to know that whole continuum of services that's available. And all of this is in the reading and the IRIS modules that are on for you to look at in the videos. The reasons that you have inclusion, the tiers for MTSS, there's 1, 2, and 3, and what each one of those levels represents. There's some scenarios, and it's going to ask you if this is legal or if it's not legal. So be thinking about the laws, and then what parent rights are. Basically, parents' rights are, in a nutshell, you can't do anything unless the parent signs a piece of paper that says you can. That's pretty much it. There's even a law that says that student stays put. If you go to due process, like parents totally disagree with you at the school and you would go to due process hearings, the child stays put where they are until parents sign papers to change that placement or the courts decide. Parents have total rights. And how many of you have to give your parents, well, you all have to, supposedly, have seen the whole schmeal that goes with parents' rights? It's like a book. It's yay thick, and it's in fine print. And they can't reduce it down to just one page because parents have so many rights. And if it were my child getting services, I want those rights. Believe me, I don't want somebody making decisions about my child that I don't have input into and final say on.
Are you talking about the parent safeguards?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be on my 15th IEP next week, and I've had 0 parents accept the safeguards because they have, oh no, I have a stack of these at home. So number 15 is next week.
Yeah, save those trees. Yeah, I printed out, well, and at the high school level, they have been through so many IEPs, and they know the rights haven't changed. They don't want another copy of it, and they're not going to read it anyway. And
even with my 3rd and 4th graders, I've been teaching for 4 years, so I think I'm at like 100 some IEPs, and I've never had a parent say, "Yes, please."
Yeah.
And every time I'm still like, "Do you want to?"
Would you like it?
Never have I had someone say yes. So I'm with you.
Yeah,
never.
You take one copy I printed one copy at the beginning of the school year, and you took it to every staffing because nobody took it. If you have parents who do not speak English, you are to give them their rights and their notice of meetings in their native language. Do you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So for those of you who work with students from multiple countries and different languages, your provider, whoever it is supposed to be furnishing that for you. So if you know you have in our area, Spanish is the most common language other than English. If I have students whose parents speak Spanish, I have to have an interpreter. You have to have an interpreter at the meeting so they understand what's being said. Then I have to give them the forms in Spanish. And then when we send them into the office to be filed, they go in Spanish and English. So both sets of forms go in. It has to be in the parent's native language. And go ahead, Linda.
The IEP is also in Spanish.
No, the IEP isn't. Just the forms for their signatures are in Spanish. I don't know why.
Do you have a written prior notice that you have to give to the parents with them?
The prior written notice is in Spanish.
Okay.
And their rights are in Spanish.
Okay.
But the IEP is not. And that meets the letter of the law, but I don't know why. I just know it is.
Okay.
Okay.
I worked in a larger district where we always had an interpreter come, but also they would have us give a copy of the IEP to the school liaison, and she would then write it in Spanish, so they would be able to take a copy home even after the meeting was over. And that was great because at the new district I'm at, we just have an interpreter come and that's it.
And that's common in smaller districts. I do college accreditation. I told you that. And one of the colleges that I visited was telling me, was in Kansas City area. They were telling me they had a phone number, and I wasn't quick enough to get it written down. Anyway, they could call into this phone number and they would translate anything into. They had 37 languages that they could translate paperwork into. And I thought, oh my gosh, it would be so nice. But it's going to be based on need in your area, I think. So, and if your interpreter at the meeting does a good enough job of explaining things to the parents, they're going to be fine. But they should be able to understand what they're signing and giving you permission to do with their child. Okay, so that is all I have for tonight. Does anybody have any questions or comments? No?
Thank you for being very thorough and giving us lots of great information. I appreciate it.
Well, you're more than welcome. Hopefully it's all, no, I started to say hopefully it's all accurate. It is almost all accurate. Sometimes things change. Hi. One of the reasons that I mentor, because I still work in the schools and mentor, is so I can stay current on. Because even though the law hasn't changed, sometimes court cases come up and decisions are based on court cases, and so that impacts everything. So by working in the public schools, I still get to be in on all that court case stuff and know what's changing, and so it stays more current. So sometimes on your IEP, what you have may agree with the process handbook, but things have changed since that process handbook was published. And so I'll give you I don't ding you for it, I'll give you the latest information. This IEP that you're going to turn in 2 weeks is only worth 1 point out of your 1,000 points. So don't stress over it, okay? Because you're going to turn it in 2 more times before we're graded. Scott, did you have a question?
Yeah, just real quick on you had mentioned the goals were not going to be a part of this 2 weeks, but it looked like on the assignment that it was expected. Maybe I read that incorrectly.
I don't intend for it to be. So even though
Okay.
if it's on the assignment, it's not supposed to be.
Okay.
And you know, part of that assignment sheet went from the 16 weeks to the 8 weeks to the 7 weeks, now back to 9 weeks, and I might not have gotten everything changed.
Okay.
Okay, so what you're responsible for, let me scroll back up and make sure so that we're all on the same page. What you're responsible for is quiz 1 on instructional practices, quiz 2 on the IEP process, and the first draft of the IEP, and it's just the student information and the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. I don't want you to do goals yet this time, because I want to make sure that you have the heart part, not the heart, the heart part of the IEP about who the student is before we start on goals.
Okay.
Okay? And so, like I said, this IEP is only worth 1 point. I expect that it's done, and I want you to try your best, but I will make comments and suggestions on them, give them back to you before you have to do the next part so that you can fix it. So by the time you submit it the 3rd time for your final draft, and it's 300 points, it's perfect.
Okay.
Okay. And I will try to get a sample one of the new one up and going this week sometime.
Okay.
Okay. So focus on the quizzes, and if you don't do as well, if you don't get a 26 on the quiz, you need to retake it. They have a due date on them, but the 5 of them have to be done by the end of the semester, and I'm not real picky about due dates on those. I would rather you read the information and are really ready for it, because they are very detailed questions. A few of you have taken some of them, and you know they're really detailed. So read and study carefully before you take it. All right. If you have information to share with me, like if your school system does something different than what I'm saying, speak up. Don't be shy. All right. So anything else for the good of the order? I think it's. Mhm.
Can we assume that if from the case study to the IEP, if it would, I mean, like in my co-op, and I assume everyone else's, I don't know, we have file reviewers that review all of our IEPs before we actually like submit them and make corrections if we need to. And they send them back, we have to fix them, then it goes to the director, chief checks it, we have to fix them again. And then we also have like audits every few years or whatever. So just, can I assume that if it's something that would pass like my co-op's process or whatever, that it's gonna be okay?
Assume that I'm your file auditor.
That's what I'm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will make comments on there if I want it changed. All right. If it does, if what you're suggesting or what you're writing isn't legal or whatever, I will tell you this needs to be taken off, and I'll tell you why. Or if I think you left something out, I'll put a note on there and tell you need to be sure to include this. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I spend quite a bit of time going through them. Because I really want you to learn to do it, to do IEPs and to do them really well. Like I said, you know, what you're doing in your co-op may be one habit right now, but if you move someplace else, and some of the things that different co-ops do, it's not because it's the law, and it's not because it's because of legislation or court cases. It's because they think it's better that way. And that's fine for there, but it may not be fine for Colorado or Kansas City or something different. So I'll just make comments on those. I don't ding people hard on them. And, you know, if you turn it in this time, you'll get the point, but I want you to put some effort into it.
Yeah.
And don't stress about it. Just put what you see is there, and then we'll fill it in as we go.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, I think it's 2 weeks from tonight, maybe. Does Monday night work pretty well for everybody? For you guys? Okay, so I think it's 2 weeks, same time, same place. And it's the same link always. I think it's in the course schedule, but it's always the same link to get into it. And I'll post the recording if you want to go through it, and I will also post my notes with the recording as soon as it's done. So if you have any questions, let me know. Okay. I have some comments over here first. Somebody made a comment about 504 plans. And you know, I didn't even talk about 504 plans. I didn't even think about it. Are you familiar with 504 plans?
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody familiar with them pretty well. A 504 plan says that 504 is section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. It's a law that people have to have equal access. 504 plans are what happens when kids leave high school and have an IEP and they need assistance in college. They roll over into a 504 plan because an IEP only covers through age 21 if they're still in high school at 21. 504 plans are access for life, from birth to death. Curb cuts so that people in wheelchairs can get up and down off the sidewalks and in the streets, that's a result of 504 because people had to have access to be able to get into the stores. In colleges, when they first started out with 504 plans, one of the students I had who was an amazing student, worked his tail end off, was even like a Discover Card student scholar finisher, like in the top 3 in the nation. I mean, he was an amazing kid. Went to college and they would not let him use calculator in his math class in college. And he just refused. And finally it took his mom going up and saying, "Can I talk to your 504 officer? This is how much power a 504 plan has." When she asked to talk to their 504 officer, the principal of the college who was walking her around and showing things tripped over a crack in the sidewalk that wasn't there. And he says, "Yes, we'll take you to him right now." And it got fixed right then, because that is a lawsuit waiting to happen if you don't have access. And he did not have access to the math curriculum without having a calculator. So it just gives you access. In today's, and this was a long time ago, in today's world with the technology that we have, you can have your computer read everything to you that's on a screen, and all computers will do that as long as you have a speaker. There's an accessibility button that you can get into your settings, and it'll read everything to you. All of the textbooks now, you can get electronic versions, or they have them in the library, they're on tapes or whatever. So access now is basically access to being able to get into the classroom. And if it was going to be a second story classroom and somebody's in a wheelchair or uses crutches and can't do lots of stairs, they have to move the class down for them. It isn't what it used to be. But anyway, that's what a 504 has become. But 504s are used for kids who don't have a learning disability sometimes. I mean, in public schools, who might have some health issues that they don't really qualify for other health impaired. They don't meet any of the 13 recognized disability labels, categories. And so they'll put them on a 504 plan so they can still have help. And they do a plan form that's very similar, typically, to an IEP. Maybe not as in depth, but they're still it's still a written up plan that the parents have to sign off on and everything. Does that give you some clues about 504s? They're not used as much as IEPs in public schools. They're used in colleges more than they are in public schools anyway. If your student needs extra time to take a test, like they need double time to take the test because they process information slowly, like they have to read and think about it, in a college setting, they might ask for a 504 plan so that they can have that time. All right. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Okay, I'll see you in 2 weeks. Okay, good night.